Okay.
Good? Solid?
Yep.
All right. What's going on, everybody? This is Dr. Schilling from Secoya Health, bringing this week's Wednesday Wellness Minutes. And this week we're going to talk about stopping the bleeding from your butt. And that's, of course, supposed to catch your attention for a reason. And what we're doing is getting your attention because we're talking about ulcerative colitis. There's a segue into, we're talking about Crohn's disease. Forgive me. And there is certainly an overlap with ulcerative colitis, but Crohn's disease is the major one. So we're going to start off by giving you some stats because they're pretty staggering when you look at it. And it's a very, very misunderstood thing. People have misdiagnosed Crohn's disease as an autoimmune disease. It's misdiagnosed as what most people call as an inflammatory bowel disease and things like that. But of course, we have to thank Dr. Burl B. Crohn back in 1932 for diagnosing Crohn's disease. He got his name on there, and he'll be indelibly remembered for the rest of eternity with Crohn's. Amazingly, 700,000 people right now, so 330 million people in the country of the U.S., 700,000 people have this diagnosis, right? So they've been labeled Crohn's. Of those people, that costs about $11 billion with a B, $11 billion a year to the U.S. economy as far as the health system paying for people with Crohn's disease, which is staggering. When you think about most people, after they've used their insurance for this, it's $8,250 per year per person. So when you think about 700,000 times that number, that's a big number. 8,000 new people are diagnosed with this per year. Okay, so this is not going anywhere, and the trend is only going skyward, like most diseases. You may have caught that trend. Most often happens to be people within 13 to 30 years old, but the 20 seems to be a pretty big hot spot for this as far as it manifesting. It can happen anywhere in the GI system, whereas ulcerative colitis is typically in the colon. Crohn's disease can happen anywhere from basically the mouth to the anus. It can happen anywhere along there. It's more general from that standpoint. So let's just think about, for example, another differential diagnosis between ulcerative colitis and Crohn's is that Crohn's is all through all the layers, whereas ulcerative colitis is in more of the superficial layer. But the differential diagnosis is what are called granulomas, these little pockets of injury sites within the bowel, wherever it might be, and that's what differentiates ulcerative colitis from Crohn's. So some of the symptoms, if you're not familiar with Crohn's, hopefully you are not suffering with that, but if you are, we can help you with that. Persistent diarrhea with mucus in there, as we mentioned in the tagline for this, stop the bleeding from your blood. People can have blood in their stools. We can have inflammation in the bowel, of course, bloating and gas and things like that. Weight loss is a big issue. If there's an issue with not absorbing, malabsorption, malnutrition, weight loss and things like that, especially dehydration, because the colon, if it's affecting that, is a big organ for reabsorption of water. So keep that in mind. Things to consider outside of the medical view, if you will, things that are pretty common in our world as far as finding the root cause of this are going to be foods. Food sensitivities are going to inflame the bowel. So when you think about food sensitivities for gluten or dairy or corn or soy or things of that nature, those are big time problem makers for people with Crohn's and things like that. You can also think of yeast. There are two major types that we tend to see pretty frequently. Candida is one. These are just families. They'll be just Candida albicans or Candida albicans is one of my friends who's a researcher in yeast. And then there's coccidioides, which is another one. Mycobacterium, of course, a really specific type of bacterium, has been diagnostically associated with Crohn's and things like that. Parasites are a big problem when it comes to Crohn's, as well as in our world, neuroemotional stress. We know that if there's a problem in the body and that's in the absence of trauma, that something's broken down on the inside before the outside. And therefore, if it's not an injury to the inside from having ingested something, it's coming from a disconnect between the brain and the body. So just keep that in mind. And also mercury toxicity is a big problem for a lot of people. If you have any metal in your teeth, you definitely want to consult a biological dentist. If you need a referral, we have a list of biological dentists we can provide you. In the Twin Cities here, Shoreview, Oakdale, Egan, Edina, and Hopkins. So there's somewhere in your area or close to you that you can go get help and get these metals out of your body safely. It's very, very important. Metal in your teeth is not innocuous, it's not benign, it is causing problems. It just depends on when it rears its ugly head for you. So when we think of the neuro connection between the brain and the body and why Crohn's is the way it is, just like ulcerative colitis, it tends to flare up and be more calm, if you will. So we talk about it's called a hanging healing. So something just hangs out there and it drags on. Right? So people can have issues with this for weeks or months, depending on your symptoms and stuff like that. So we want to think about it, it's a chronic condition, it relapses and remits, and then when you get stress, typically it's stress that causes these things, it flares up, right? Causing more mucus or more blood in your stool or more inflammation in the bowel, loss of weight, inflammatory issues like that. So there are also times where they're condition-free and you're not experiencing anything as far as your health goes, and you seem to be pretty good. You know, hum along, all of a sudden, whoop, you get a little something that trips you up. Most likely it's not the food. You know, people with diverticulitis, which is another inflammatory bowel condition, they're told don't eat fruits with small seeds in them, like raspberries and things like that, because they might get stuck in your diverticuli and they'll get inflamed. Coming from the natural healthcare, that to me is an absolute absurd way to look at things, but then again, they're entitled to their opinion and they're just looking for helping them with the best information they have. Sure. Another idea within the neurological, neuroemotional connection between the body and the brain is that it's an indigestible conflict, if you will. And what that means is really like it's something that's hard to accept. And that can come in many forms. It could be a situation you can't accept. So I wrote some examples. Work-related anger, school-related anger, relationship-related anger. Something, a remark you received, an accusation, an insult, or a criticism can be very problematic for you. News that's hard to take or difficult to digest can be problematic as far as the digestive system goes. In Chinese medicine, one way we think about the colon is about control. So if you feel like there's a lack of control or someone's overstepped your boundaries and your barriers, if you will, and it feels like your lack of control or out of control, or if it's small intestine, it's about acceptance, feeling lack of acceptance or being unable to accept something. It's very important as far as understanding the bowel system. So those are just some ideas to help you understand different areas to look for that are outside of the medical model, right? Other than changing maybe what you eat, you got to dig deeper. So what I want to share with you is a case study. Really, we've helped many people with inflammatory bowel conditions. It's always fun to see what happens with a person who comes in with a diagnosis, right? So this young man had been labeled. So he came in after some attempts with the medical field, and they were putting him on an elemental diet. Elemental, basically a liquid, right? They weren't giving him any food. They thought, well, we can't figure out what's going on, so we're just going to put you on a liquid diet, which, when you think about it, it's not going to go very far because you're not uncovering, you're just waiting for things to calm down and then try to reintroduce food. If that doesn't work, just put him back on the liquid diet. It doesn't sound like a really good help for me, but for some people it might. So let's think about it. This young man came in back in August of 2017, and he had a guy, I'll speak English for my first language as far as I understand, a diagnosis of Crohn's disease. And he was, this young man, taller than I am. I'm 6'1.5", right? 6'1", whatever it is. He's probably 6'2", 6'3". He weighed 128 pounds. And if you have any idea what 128 pounds looks like on a 6'2" person, it's not healthy. But he was losing weight, they didn't know why, so they put this young man on an elemental diet. His normal weight prior to getting this issue with the Crohn's, right? I'll use the quotes for the Crohn's because that was his diagnosis. It was 150, right? So fast forward, and where he was at when I last checked, and I've seen him since then, but last time I took a note related to that was in July of 2018, and he was already up to 165 pounds, okay? So we're talking a matter of 11 months, okay? Was able to recover all of his weight and put on 15 more pounds. So that's how it should work, okay? You should be able to have a functional bowel system, functional digestive system, where you're absorbing your food, breaking down your food, and not having it waste away, okay? So I want to give you some insights as far as how we approached him. And if you know anything about how we operate with kinesiology and biofeedback, it's like, it's not the doctor's idea of like, here's your symptoms, we're gonna play nutraceuticals with it. We're gonna say, okay, it sounds like you have inflammation, so we're gonna give you a bunch of anti-inflammatories, we'll give you some fish oils, and we'll give you some curcumin or some turmeric and stuff like that. We'll just damp down the inflammation. Ultimately, what it started off with this young man was it was yeast. Yeast was the biggest trigger for him starting off. And so I'll just kind of give you an idea as we march through. So he started off with yeast at first. There was some generalized yeast, there was some candida, then went into parasites, okay? So as we alluded to earlier, it can be a bunch of different stuff. So yeast, then parasites. We used some probiotics with this young man. Then there was some viral stress. And then there were some more bacterial and parasitic stress. We did use some anti-inflammatories, but not necessarily intensely. That was more to help as the body was healing, just to break down the inflammation in the gut and things like that. Used a lot of protein to build his muscle mass back up, supported his thyroid, more yeast support, used some colostrum, supported the liver and gallbladder with the taurine, went into some more yeast yet. That's where we came into the coccidioids, so we had candida and coccidioids both pop up, more viral stress, more probiotics, and ultimately, when we came down to it, once we got past all the GI stuff, he was humming along, and then we just continued to, just as the parasites and the viruses came up, we just supported his immune system. And now he's happy and healthy, star in his sport of choice, moving and shaking. He's now in college, which is fantastic. And basically, he's doing some maintenance stuff. He's doing a multivitamin. He's got the pH balancer, which is fantastic stuff. He's using some B complex to support his adrenals. And when he needs it, he uses some other stuff. But he's definitely on a digestive enzyme and things like that. So I just want to give you an insight in terms of, we haven't shared many case studies, but that's just a really easy one to share because it was not straightforward, but it illuminates for you, or illustrates rather, how these intricacies and how the web is woven. You can't just go in there and say, oh, there's inflammation in the gut, right? He's pooping mucus and there must be some yeast or mold or fungus, right? You don't know what it is. There's some indicators you can go that direction, but until you ask the body and figure out what's going on, you're not going to know for sure. So when you think about it, you need to figure out what the body knows about its healing ability and what it's holding it up. And from there, what you want to do is support in that direction based on what it needs, not necessarily what the doctor thinks. The doctor is the teacher and the guide in the process. We call them active participants. The active participant is the healer, and that's where we differentiate ourselves from everyone else. We guide you in your healing process, we help you heal, we support your body and optimize its healing ability, and then you take over the healing process. And we're your support team and things like that. So that's what we do. I certainly hope this has been beneficial for anyone who's dealing with Crohn's. If you feel like you've hit a roadblock, if you feel like all you're doing is masking and managing your symptoms, let us know. And this is not indicative of everybody's path. Yours will be unique for you. But what you want to understand is that you have a unique process. Your body needs to unwind it and heal in a certain pattern. And we don't know what that is yet, but we can certainly help you uncover that and make it much more enjoyable in life than wondering. I have two people that come to mind, but when they drive here from their home initially, they knew exactly where every bathroom was on the way. They knew every gas station, they knew what mile marker it was, and they knew when they had to pop off, because that's what happens when you have an inflammatory bowel condition and it's uncontrolled. You don't know what's going to happen, so you need to be prepared. When in doubt, it always depends. But we want to get you out of Depends as fast as possible, right? At any rate, so let us know, give us a thumbs up. If this is somehow not helpful, which we would hope not, if there's any ideas for improving, other than me talking slower and providing more in depth, just let us know. We're happy to help. That's what we're here to provide the service for you. Share with your friends and family who might be suffering from an inflammatory bowel condition like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or something like that. It doesn't have to be this big mystery. Take the label off. Remember we talked about last week, ditch the diagnosis. Get rid of the bleeding from your butt, whatever it is you have going on. There's a reason behind it. What you need to do is understand what's causing it, and we can help you figure that out and get rid of it and help you heal for the rest of your life. Okay? It doesn't have to be a short-term thing. It's not about masking symptoms, but healing for the rest of your life. All right?